to making sequels, the only reason they should be made, in my opinion, is if they have a legitimate reason for continuing the storyline of the original. While it may sound odd for me to say this, the Madagascar series actually has such a reason, to follow the adventures of the characters as they try to make it back to New York City. Whether you actually want this plot to continue or not, this is reason enough to make sequels. Not a lot of sequels, but enough to finish the story. So when Madagascar 3 came out, I was actually somewhat enthusiastic to go see it. And did it live up to my expectations? Well, kind of. In terms of animated films in general, this movie isn't anything special, but to be fair, the first two films weren't either. And when comparing this film to them, I think this is a big improvement. As I mentioned earlier, the story continues the plotline of Alex, Marty, Melman, and Gloria still struggling to get home to New York. This time around, their journey takes them to Europe, where they are relentlessly pursued by the fanatical animal control officer Captain Chantal Dubois. To get through the continent without attracting too much attention, the gang hitches a ride with a traveling circus that promises to get to North America, but only if the circus can impress a wealthy benefactor at their performance in London. Which is a problem because the circus is no longer as impressive as it was during its glory days. So in order to get back home, the zoo animals must revive the struggling circus while at the same time evading Dubois' wrath. Let's talk about the negative aspects of the film first, because although this is probably the strongest of the series, it still has its flaws. I think the major problem is that, like its predecessors, the story isn't particularly well developed. A good example of this being at the beginning of the movie, which starts with the animals in Africa, then cuts to them along the coastline of Monte Carlo. Well, now wait a minute, how did they get there? Did they swim all the way there? Did they hitch a ride on a boat? I don't know, it's never explained. While there aren't too many other plot holes like the one I just mentioned, it's still pretty clear that the story isn't the film's strongest quality. By the way, you know that plot line where somebody lies about something that is eventually cast out when exposed as a liar, only for them to return to save the day? Yeah, that's in this movie. The zoo animals lie that they're actually circus animals in order to get on the train, and if you know this cliche, it's fairly easy to predict where this piece of the plot is going, which will not make certain people such as Doug Walker happy. Also, the main four characters aren't given very much development in this movie, which really makes it hard for me to get invested in their story arc. I guess I wouldn't mind too much if they were more entertaining, but disappointingly, they don't have any particular highlights in this movie. Not even Melman has a good enough moments, which is a shame because he's not only the reason David Schwimmer still has a career, but he's my personal favorite of the four. So those are my main issues with the movie, but to be fair, it has other minor annoyances, like for example, its use of 3D. Now I appreciate that this movie is trying to actually make good use of 3D technology and just slapping it on like a lot of other films, but the thing is, I saw this movie in 2D, and like a lot of other people, I found the constant throwing of random things at my face to be really obnoxious. In 3D, this might have worked okay, but in 2D, not so much. Speaking of obnoxious, I might as well address the elephant in the room. No, not that elephant. There we go. At first, I thought this was mildly entertaining, but as soon as it became the film's big marketing gimmick, I got annoyed with it real fast, and it certainly doesn't help that they do this 3 times throughout the entire movie. So now that the bad stuff's out of the way, let's get to the more enjoyable parts of the movie. First of all, the animation and visual look of the film, while not DreamWorks' best, has improved a lot over the past few films. It takes advantage of the new circus storyline and makes the film much more colorful and energetic. Many people seem to cite the big circus performance near the end of the second act as the best scene in the movie, and yeah, it's not hard to see why. It's by far the most visual appealing scene in the movie, if not the entire series. Also, while I don't get very much out of the main 4 characters, the rest of them are much more enjoyable. I think by far the best is the circus leader, Vitani the tiger, and the backstory they give the character is surprisingly tragic. I know it sounds crazy to call something about Madagascar tragic, and to be completely honest, it's really not that depressing, but it does have a big impact on not only Vitani, but the rest of the circus animals as well, making me care for their story arc far more than that of the main characters. While the remaining characters aren't that well developed, they're still pretty enjoyable for the most part. The penguins and chimps don't get quite as much screen time as before, but when they do, they manage to get no less than a slight chuckle out of me. The same can be said for the lemurs, with the exception of King Julian. He doesn't have a whole lot going for him for the first few minutes of the movie, but when he forms a romantic relationship with the circus's tricycle-riding bear, that's when things get even funnier. Just the idea alone brings up so many joke possibilities, and the ones presented are downright hilarious. As for the rest of the new characters, they're okay. Gia the Jaguar doesn't really have a lot to her, and she really doesn't serve much purpose outside being a love interest for Alex. But to her credit, her voice for Dr. Jessica Chastain, she does a pretty good Hispanic accent. Martin Short's Stefano the Seal is also pretty enjoyable. Again, not a whole lot of personality, but a great performance by Short more than makes up for it. But by far the funniest of the newcomers is the Animal Control Officer Chantal Dubois. I've heard complaints that she resembles Cruella de Vil too much, and yeah, I can sorta see that with her desire to hunt down animals, but at the same time, the way they treat her obsession of hunting them down results in scenarios that aren't just funny, but are actually really inventive. Hold up. Well, as I said before, on a film on its own, there really isn't anything spectacularly noteworthy about it, but as a Madagascar film, I think it's a worthy addition to the series. But still, I do hope this is the last of the bunch. There was already a risk of the series going downhill at this point, as a lot of other series do, and I'd rather have this series end on a high note. If you're never a big Madagascar fan to begin with, then I don't know if this will change your mind or not, but if you do like the series, then this is a film that I highly recommend.
DreamWorks Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, in 3D.
Hey, this is not first class.
Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I'm sexy and I know it.
Has anyone ever told you that you look like a supermodel? Wow, what a woman.
I work out.